The ultimate driving machine is what BMW's slogan is. And I think that BMW F11 represents that perfectly with its practicality and elegance. Even though this car is 14 years old, it still looks good even up to today's standard. However, exactly this model is not in too good of a shape right now. Yeah.
Previously, we rebuilt a wrecked BMW E91, but instead of selling it, we traded it for a BMW F11 with a blown engine. Then, we pulled the engine out, stripped it fully down and found a spun bearing, which means that the engine has to be replaced, or well, in this case, rebuilt. We ended the last episode by delivering the engine block and the head to the machine shop to get it ready to be rebuilt.
Today, it's time to build the engine up from bare block to a running motor. Here we have the engine block and the engine head, and also the valves and pistons with rods. As we know from the last video, this is not a traditional steel sleeve block. This is an aluminum block with alloy steel sleeves. So it's like a coating, special coating inside the sleeves, and you can't fix them. The only way to repair this block if the sleeves are damaged is to re-sleeve it with normal steel sleeves. But doing that is very hard. Not many machine shops can do it. However, our block was in a good condition. So the only thing we did is we got the machine shop to hone out, kind of, and make the cylinder walls rough and ready for the new rings. Because if you don't hone a block, the rings are not gonna get worn in properly. Even if you take a used block, you touch the cylinder walls, it's as slippery as glass. However, here, when it's already been honed and made ready, it's slightly more rough. You can barely feel it on this alloy steel block, but it is a bit more rough. So, first thing to go on the block is the piston squirters. The old ones, there's nothing wrong with them. So there's actually a special tool that sets the placement of these. I mean the angle which it sits, but I don't have that. But it's fully fine to just do it from the eye. So here I have a picture that I took of the placement of it with something like this. And it's torqued to 12 Newton meters. So now I had the picture of around the way it sits, and now it's around that. Not a big deal as long as you get it close enough. All of them are on, torqued to spec. So here we have the head. I already put in the other valves. First thing, I will put on new valve stem seals. So first, a little bit of oil, then on with the valve stem seal. Then I find a socket that fits over the valve stem seal like that on the outer lip. Then I just tap it in place. Just like that. Then let's flip the head over. So here is the valves. You guys remember from the last video, the seating surface here, it was very spotty, a bunch of black spots. And when you lap the valves yourself with lapping compound, you basically just fill up the little holes that get created over time, and you just basically cover up the damage. You don't really grind the valves in properly. When you do it with a machine, then you grind them in properly, and then it creates the perfect seating surface. So the last video we removed the valves, and the machine guy grinded them in with a machine. So now you can see the whole surface is same color, the edge itself, and also the edge on the head. So I'm just lubing up the valve and I'm just putting them in. Then also the intake one. Take the valve spring, put it on. Then I take this generic valve spring tool and I put it from under on the valve. And I compress it like that. Good tip, one of you guys told me previously in the comments. Take the retaining clip and put a bit of grease on it. And then I have this magnetic screwdriver. Then I take the retainer like that and I carefully put it on the valve. Then I do it one more time, put a bit of grease on the side where it's gonna sit on the valve, and I do it again. At first, if you do this for a first time, it's gonna take a long time, but if you've done it many enough times, it's gonna become a lot easier. Just like that. And that was the last intake valve. So now I need to do the exhaust valves. And exhaust valves should be easier because the retainers are a lot bigger and the valves are a lot thicker. So then the retainers. And put there you go. Yeah, so now two valves are in. I'll do the rest off camera because it's not interesting, you guys get the concept. Now all the valves are in, so the head is ready for being put on the engine. So now I'll put it to the side. Here I have the new main bearings. I bought OE Colburn Smith. So then just put the bearing in with the little notch and just push it in place. So now all the bearings are in. The only difference between the bearings are that one is bigger and this middle one, it has this full washer around it or something. So the way you put it in, you align the notch and you just push it in. The bottom bearings has these grooves in the middle for the oil to pass, while the top bearings don't have that. The top ones are just flat. Now let's bring the bed plate. I'm also removing the old bearings. Now this is as clean as it's gonna get. For some reason much discoloration, but everything is clean now. Now we can start with the biggest bearing in the end here. That's all the bearings new. So the bed plate is ready. So we will measure the clearance first before we seal the bed plate off for the last time. But now you guys know that the crankshaft that we had was damaged. So I didn't even try to send it in to get repaired. But we bought another crankshaft. This crankshaft is also from an N53 engine, just from an E90 I think. So it seems that this crankshaft has been stored for a long time. All the journals were dirty. Now we can see that all of the journals are perfect. including number 6, which was spun on the old crankshaft. Absolutely perfect. So I put on a new crankshaft as well with the old bolt. And the way we check the clearance is using this thing. This is plastic gauge. There are these round lines which we cut up and we will put on the crankshaft before tightening it, and that's gonna show the clearance of how much the plastic gauge spreads out after it gets squished, and then we will find the clearance this way by how wide it is. Now I will just cut it up, put the plastic gauge on like that. Now I have placed plastic gauge on every single of the journals, not the conrods yet because we'll do this later. And now we will carefully put on the bed plate. Now I'm reinstalling the old steel bolts, which I oiled up. Then it's torqued firstly to 20 Newton meters, and then it's 70 degrees of angle. Done. So in the manual we see that crankshaft bearing clearance is supposed to be between 0.020 and 0.046 millimeters. When we look at the width of the plastic gauge, here the first one looks around a bit bigger than 0.038, so that's good. So first one's good, the second probably 0.30, that's 0.25, that is also 0.25, 0.30 and 0.025. So the clearances are on the tighter side, but everything is still in spec. It's not a high performance engine, so this is gonna work just fine. So now we can remove the plastic gauge, remove the crankshaft, and apply assembly lube. The way we remove plastic gauge is some brake cleaner on a rag and just wipe it off. And now, before we put the bed plate on, we need to seal off this groove so it doesn't leak. BMW from factory uses this and this injection port, and it injects sealant, then it goes all the way through the gap out to the sides, and then it hardens and then it seals. That's what was in the engine now, what we removed. In the repair manual, there is 2 ways to seal the bed plate. You can use the injection method, but I have heard people being not that satisfied with that method because sometimes it doesn't harden and stuff like that. The second way BMW seals off the bed plate is using special sealant. So they just put a bit of sealant in this groove and they put the bed plate on. I have tried the sealant. It just feels like normal silicone. So I did not bother buying it. So we will just use Rhinestone seal. Is gonna work just fine. I would even say it's gonna work better than the sealant from BMW. Sorry for the background sounds, but there's some people working outside and I can do nothing about that. Now I applied the sealant and also assembly lube on top of the bearings. Now we can put the bed plate on. Then here I have new bolts, which I oiled up. Now I will put in the lower bed plate bolts and torque them down. So firstly, the M10 bolts are torqued 15 Newton meters and the M8 bolts are 10 Newton meters. And lastly, all of the bolts 90 degrees. The crankshaft is in place. Pretty good. And here are the pistons. I cleaned them up as best as I could and they look amazing. They look almost like new. Piston number 6 was slightly damaged. It wasn't something that I wanted to use. You can see slight wear on the wall here from the rod knock. It's probably shaked around the piston, but it's not crazy bad. But since I bought the crankshaft, I also bought one piston with a rod from the same guy. And this is the piston that I bought. I already installed the piston rings and gapped them on the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th and 6th cylinder, so we will still need to do it on the number 1. Rings installed, measured so they are gapped correctly, and it's basically ready for being installed into the car. I took the piston with me to the machine guy, we measured it, and we could see that the piston number 6 was worn a lot more here on the sides. So this one is in a lot better shape at least. So all the rest of the pistons are fine. We will reuse. Piston rings. OE, Kolben Schmidt. That's what these engines come with from factory. So we will start with the oil ring. Oil ring consists of 3 different rings that are wedged in one groove. 2 flat rings and 1 Z-form-ish ring. And as we see in the manual, the middle ring is like it goes under the outer ring. So you need to install the middle ring first, and then you put in the outer rings. Where the gap is on the ring, it must be in 3 different directions. And if we are talking about clearance, the oil ring, the 3rd one, it doesn't have any clearance. So there's only clearance on the 2 top rings, the compression rings. So firstly, I don't have a ring tool. I just use a hand. So there you go. The oil ring is in. It's not supposed to overlap or anything, just that the ends meet like that. No overlapping, nothing. Now the 2 other rings, there is no direction which way the top is. So it's the same. There you go, now it's at the bottom. Now we put the 3rd oil ring. Now the 3 different oil rings are looking in 3 different directions. This is the 2nd ring, and this is the top ring. Now we need to measure the gap clearance. Now I'm oiling the cylinder. The thing is with these original rings, if it's not a race car, original pistons, you're just replacing the rings in a simple rebuild, 99% of the time you wouldn't need to do any gapping, any adjustment, because they are already gapped correctly from the factory. But it's still a good measure to check, just in case. This is the 2nd compression ring. It says top on the side which faces the top, of course. Put the ring in. I'm gonna use the destroyed piston to push it down in so it's straight. So the manual states that the 2nd groove and clearance is supposed to be between 0.3 and 0.5 millimeters. With these original rings, it's gonna be more towards the looser side. So I'm gonna immediately go to a 0.5 because that's the biggest limit. We will see if it fits or not. So you can see it does not fit into the groove. There's no way. So then let's try 0.4, and that does fit into the groove perfectly. 0.5 doesn't fit. 0.4 does fit. The 2nd ring is in spec. We don't need to do any kind of grinding because it's supposed to be between 0.3 and 0.5. So this one's around 0.4. So that is perfect. The top ring doesn't matter which direction it goes. There is no top, there is no bottom. There is some letters here, so I'm just gonna go put that in the top. Now the top groove is supposed to be between 0.15 and 0.30. So here I found 0.2. That fits. And here I have 0.3. That fits almost. That fits, but it's very tight. If this 0.4 fits now, it's too loose. Yeah, there's no way. So the gap for this one is 0.3. On a used engine like that, it's always going to be more on the looser side because the cylinders are more worn. So here it says top. Then we put it on. There you go. And also the top ring. Just like that. Good. And all these are the Conrad bearings. Conrad bearings are the same for the side that goes on the cap and the one that goes on the rod. Align the notch and just perfect. Just like that. Then here, a little bit of plastic gauge. So now 20 Newton meters. And then 60 degrees twice. So the clearance for the rod bearings 0.025 to 0.060. Yep, that is exactly on 0.038. And the other one 0.038 as well. So can't get any more perfect than that. Assembly loop on both of the rods. Then push the rod back in place on the cap. Done. Now I put in piston number 2 and 5 and the clearance is exactly the same, 0.038 and 0.038. Now I'm gonna put a similar loop, the caps on, and I will put in the last two pistons with the rods. Okay, so we see that cylinder number 3 and 4, 0.038 and 0.038 are also in spec. So that's it. All the bearings are the correct size in this engine right now with the correct clearance. Now I'm just gonna torque it down with the new bolts. Working beautiful. I will put the cylinder number 1 at the complete TDC, degrease all the surface where the head gasket is gonna sit. Block and the head was resurfaced. Right now it needed resurfacing because it was slightly uneven on this side of the block, so number 6. He says because it probably got hot because of the rod knock. So he said on this side some material got taken off. And that is why I bought a thicker head gasket. And you can see that it is a thicker one. Original head gasket for this engine I think is like 0.3 millimeters or 0.4, and this is maybe 0.7, 0.6, so it was 0.3 millimeters thicker than the original one. And that's exactly what I needed, something like that. So we did blow out the holes earlier, clean them out with the brake cleaner, so there is no fluid in there right now. We just need to make sure when we put it on that the dowels align perfectly with the holes. And this side is aligned perfectly as well. Then all these are the old bolts and here are the new ones. Now I have the washers as well here. There are 3 different sizes of bolts, the main ones, and then M9 2 different lengths. So firstly, 30 Newton meters, all steel bolts. When torquing down a whole head, after I checked all of the bolts, I like to recheck, because usually then there's less tension and then you can get the proper torque again. Then I will torque the little bolts in the front, the aluminum ones, to 10 Newton meters. 90 degrees, all steel bolts. Second round, 90 degrees, only the big bolts. And then lastly, 45. And then last thing, the aluminum bolts 90 degrees. But they snap super easy, so I just like do it by hand and you can feel it. I want to put in the lifters, so I'm adding some oil. You have to make sure the lifters are in place and then you can reinstall the camshafts. As we can see on this camshaft already, the ledges are already replaced to the upgraded ones, so they're not metal anymore. As it says in the manual, while cylinder number 1 is at TDC, the camshafts are supposed to look outwards, the lobes. So the lobes looking from the back of the engine is looking out and is looking outwards. This one's looking almost outwards and this one's looking wrong direction, so we need to turn it this way. And then we can put on the locking tool. Because the engine is still on the bracket, I can't put the flex plate on and lock it because we already put cylinder number 1 at TDC and we will do minimal adjustments when the engine is off the stand. So now you can see that the cams are round, but exactly on one position it's flat, so you can slide it right over. That's why it's important that the back lobes are in the correct position, such as in the manual, because you can find the timing this way, or if the camshaft is upside down, then the camshaft timing is going to be completely wrong, even though it looks like it's right. Yep, now it fits right over. There you go, now the stool is going to stay on. Now the camshafts are torqued to firstly 8, and then it is actually 60 degrees. Now that is it. Now I want to reinstall the infamous high pressure fuel pump. There is a gasket on here. So on this engine, the same as on N54, the high pressure fuel pump is sitting on a vacuum pump. So this is the vacuum pump and then this is the high pressure fuel pump. Here I have this metal gasket, like that. So the vacuum pump screws are torqued to 10 Newton meters. We need to put on the oil pump. Here is actually the oil pump, the same one that was on this engine, which we inspected in the last video and found out it actually survived. And it's still in a very, very good shape. So there are 3 different length screws. Oil pump to the bed plate. All of the bolts 10 Newton meters right now, or at least, well, the big ones. The long one is 180 degrees and the short ones are 90. This little bracket, and it says front here. So it's just like that. Whole oil pickup. Firstly, 4 Newton meters, and then it's 100 degrees. So this engine doesn't struggle from a bad timing chain or anything like that. So I'm not changing the whole module. No need to waste money. Here I only have a new chain that I picked up. Okay. The chain doesn't seem to be stretched or anything. Exactly the same. Put the whole module in like that. Perfect. So this is here. And the high pressure fuel pump as well. Then there's also one bolt inside here, which I need to somehow use pliers. So the chain module, the small bolts are 4 Newton meters and 45 degrees. So previously, when I torqued the sprocket bolts, I used something in here to hold the sprocket because the tensioner is down here. And if we do that when the crankshaft is locked off and we torque it down, it's gonna twist like this and it's gonna put a lot of pressure on the tensioner, which could break it or something. So I think I will actually do it the same way. Put something in here and torque it, because I did that and it worked great previously. High pressure fuel pump sprocket is torqued to 66 Newton meters. So I will hold it like this and I will just torque it down. It's not ideal to do it this way. And I will also do the oil pump sprocket right now. Firstly 20 and 45 degrees. That is plenty. Lastly, the little plug for the hole. The timing chain module. Chain through this thing. The sprocket goes on this way because the columns on the sprockets are supposed to look at each other with the oil pump sprocket, and the oil pump sprocket sits inner, so that means closer to the engine. So just like that, the chain in like this. Then I am gonna put in the hub just so it holds in place. This is still the old bolt. We are gonna put the other bolt for the final assembly. Now this is the exhaust sprocket. The two bolts here are 9 Newton meters. Guide rail to cylinder head is 14. And the lower timing chain guide is 20. And then one screw plug. Also the Vanas solenoids that I did clean up. Now I want to seal off the oil pan because we're not going to do anything more here at the bottom. Oil pan gasket sits just like that. Here is a clean oil pan. So the oil pan bolts are all of them 8 Newton meters firstly. The long bolts in the back is 180 degrees and all the other ones are 90. Then the oil level sensor. And I will also replace the O-ring on the drain bolt. Now the oil filter housing. 22 Newton meters. Then the heat exchanger. 16. Now I put the flywheel on, or the flex plate. It's locked with the locking pin. Now I will put a new bolt both on the crankshaft and camshaft. Lock the Vanos timing. Now I will put in the timing chain tensioner, the one that is provided with the timing tool. put it in by hand. Then I will tighten it very lightly. This is supposed to be tightened to 0.2 Newton meters. Barely. Now you can see the chain is tight. Both of the lobes in the back of the camshafts are looking outwards, so that is correct. First we need to torque down the crankshaft bolt and after the camshaft bolts. Crankshaft bolt is firstly torqued to 100 Newton meters. And then it's 360 degrees. And for that, we need to put the engine on the floor. Put something softer under the engine. Top camshafts, firstly 20 Newton meters. And now 180 degrees. Now we'll install the correct tensioner and torque it to 55 Newton meters. Now remove the camshaft locking tool. Flywheel is locked. So now we see that the flywheel is locked. The camshafts are looking outwards on the lobes. The Vanos gears is locked and both of the camshafts are looking up. So the timing is indeed correct. Before we put the engine back on the engine stand, I want to put in the rear main seal. So I will put a little bit of oil. So I couldn't find in the manual how deep the seal must be inside, because I know when we took the engine apart, the seal was very deep. So I'm gonna leave it now like this, because at least in the picture on the manual, it was almost flush with the walls, and that's what I usually do. But we'll see, I hope it will not leak. Okay, the valve cover, time to put that on. I did clean it. So it's all clean now. Here is the gasket. These ones I just go until they bottom out. Install this seal and this seal. Put a little bit of oil. All the surface is good. On this big one, I just use a piece of wood to drive it in. Perfect. Also, when we put the oil pan on, there was a few uneven surfaces on the oil pan, so I did put a tiny layer of Rhine seal. That is gonna be it for this video. Pretty long one, but I think it's good to make a single video for the engine rebuild for the people that actually need some help rebuilding their engine, because I checked and there was very little information to N53 engines. If you have worked on an N54 before, you basically see it's exactly the same engine. The only difference is that this is naturally aspirated, so no turbos, nothing. In the next video I want to fully put this engine together, get it running, test drive it, finish the car, stuff like that. I hope you guys enjoyed this video because it was fun putting it together, and I hope to see you in the next one.